Hi, everybody. Welcome to UnAnchored Boston with Bob Lobel and Mike Lynch. And thankfully, we are into the month of June right now. And as always, we're brought to you by Cold Springs RV, your destination for all things camping. And where? We're in New Hampshire, of course, in the great George Gray. At George Gray's Lexington Toyota, 409 Mass Ave in Lexington, Massachusetts. All right, we have the intern of the century with us right here, Tony Maz, who was one of my interns at Channel 5. We had a couple weeks ago, we had Mike Eisenberg, one of Lobel's interns. So this is going to be the battle of the interns, Tony, today. So you better be on your game. Bobby, take it away and do the formal introduction.
Mazz, what was it like being an intern for him?
I'd use the term babysitting, but that's not fair. It was a little bit of a fire drill sometimes. Mike liked to, can we say work without a net oftentimes. So, we have a running joke that we'd be 10 minutes before airtime. And the producer who at the time was Matt Smith, Paul Lucy, who now produces Celtics games, was also a producer there for a period of time. But Matt, who's now with the Patriots, used to always ask Mike, how's that script coming? Mike would say, pretty good. Yeah, no problem. Because Mike would pretty much go off the cuff for the whole show. So, but we had a good group of people. It was a lot of fun. And, a nice group of a good, aside from being qualified people, we had nice people and good people. That was a great part of it. It was a great experience for me, Bob, in all honesty.
That's all right. Well, then, from the Jumbos to Lynch, this is a pretty big jump from Tufts.
I'd have gone to Harvard, Bob. I'd have gone to Harvard, but he couldn't get me in. So that was that.
Those days are over, Tony. They don't do that anymore, from what I understand. But
Tony was the longest running intern in the history of interns. Because he first came to us when he was a sophomore at Waltham High School. Mary Richardson used to shop in the Waverly Oaks hardware store. Is that right, Tony, where you worked?
You got it. It.
And Tony worked there. And Tony would hound her every time she came in. And finally, she walked in the sports office one day and said, you got to talk to this kid, Tony. He talks my ear off sports. I don't know as much sports, but he said he'd like to come in someday and talk with you. I said, sure, send him in. So I had him come in, and I said, I didn't have any interns on the weekend. And I said, you have to be a college sophomore or older to be an intern. But, I'll sneak you in the back door. I can't pay you, but I'll get you pizza and a Coke or Pepsi. And so he shows up the first day, and I tell him to log the Patriots game. So, I figured, he might write down 6 or 7 plays. He did it like a book report. He had 6 pages stapled and a cover page that said Patriots versus Jets, September 29th, 1983. And then it said first down and 10 at the 41-yard line, second down. And every single play in the game was written down. I said, this kid's pretty good. So we kept him on, as we call him, an illegal alien. And he did his sophomore, junior, senior in high school. Freshman and sophomore year at Tufts, and then he finally got a legal internship, but he'd already been there. He was producing shows, he was writing stuff for us, and it was great. I got to show up at like 4:30. Then it was great. I didn't have to come in at 1:45.
So, Bob, with the illegal alien thing, it's a good thing we had a different administration back then, or they just shipped me out of the country.
There's no question.
Yeah,
no question. With a middle name like Ezio, what is Ezio? How do you pronounce that?
It's pronounced like it. Pretend that there is a T after the E, so it's Ezio. It's kind of a hard Z.
Yeah, you'd be you'd be out.
Yeah, which is my father's name, and but he was born in 1936 in Italy, so it's a real Italian name. And more people called him Enzo or Enzio but it's pronounced Ezio, and fortunately, though, I did not pass it on to my kids. So,
I think it's pretty cool. I mean, it's very unique, and I think it's a good statement to have. But people should know that middle names often are forgotten. They're there for a reason.
I like he's still with us too. So my dad's 89 now, and he's getting on in years certainly, and has had some quality of life changes and things like that. but I know he appreciates it. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. But now you were in the classics. You mentioned you were English major. How the hell did you hit the mother load and doing what you're doing behind a microphone? I mean, this really was the mother load, because you and I had actually talked about doing something together like a week before you signed up with the Sports Hub, and it was like Dennis and Callahan. He really lucked out after whatever they did for their real careers. And you yourself, you worked for the Herald, you worked for the Globe, you did all kinds of interesting things. Sports writer, covered the Red Sox, your first love and all that stuff, and then you end up behind the microphone. As Lynch and I would tell you, you should have just you mainlined her right in there. I don't know how it happened, but that's life's funny the way things work.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how it all happened either. Years ago, I remember I went to Tufts, and I went back to an event there. Tufts didn't have a journalism major, to answer your first question. So the closest I could do was English and classics. And this is the honest to God's truth. Mike probably doesn't even remember this, but when I was applying to colleges, I remember asking him, if I want to do this, what is my best path? Because do I go to a journalism school? Do I go to a broadcast school? And he said, look, I think the best path is liberal arts. Get yourself a solid education, a broad education.
Wow, listen to him, Mr. Counselor.
Yeah. So, and then he said, do some writing, and college will really improve your writing, and do some different things when you're in school and experiment and see where it all takes you, which is exactly what I did. And I started writing for the school paper, which I had never done until college. And, the funny part is, and not to give you all the blow by blow on every single thing, but I had zero interest in writing, zero. And then I took a class at Tufts that was a creative writing course, and the professor I still keep in touch with because he was great to me. And he let us write whatever we wanted every week, but we had to write something. So I just sometimes wrote about things that were going on at home or with my roommates, or sometimes about a game, and all of a sudden I fell in love with it. So I started writing for the school paper. And then, you guys remember Timmy Horgan, the old columnist at the Herald.
Of course.
Tim was a Tufts guy, and someone had put me in touch with him that was in Tim's class. And, he helped get me in the door at the Herald answering phones. And that's how it all started. But, I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know, but the part that you never really understand, particularly at that age, is there's a lot of luck involved, and timing is everything.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, yeah, really. So at that time, the Red Sox were a huge, huge story, a huge beat. I had an interest in baseball. So you try to make yourself prepared when opportunities come up. And when a spot opened up on the Red Sox beat in the mid-90s, they asked me if I wanted to do it. Butch Hobson was the manager. Kevin Kennedy was about to get hired. They weren't very good. And so I wasn't about to say no. That was like a dream for me. And then Pedro came. They got good. They won a World Series. I started getting more exposure. And then the Red Sox won the World Series, and talk radio became a big thing. They started the Sports Hub, and someone asked, do you want to work with Felger? So, and I was saying,
obviously you didn't know him. Yeah, obviously you answered yes.
Yeah.
Obviously you didn't know.
So Mike and I had worked together at the Herald, but, or what I should say is we both worked at the Herald, but we didn't work together, if that makes sense. He covered hockey and football, and I actually did some Celtic stuff and Red Sox stuff. So as much as we knew each other and we had interned together, working elbow to elbow with someone 20 hours a week is a completely different animal. So, there was an adjustment period there for sure. But the thing took off, and people enjoyed it, seemed to like it. The teams continued to do well. And, we all know the numbers. In 20 years or whatever it was, Boston went to something like 23, 24 conference or league championships, and then, won 12 titles. And, again, timing was everything. We were born at the right place. We were in the right, at the right time.
Yeah, it's an amazing story, and I mean, if you'd have come to me and asked me what's the best way to get in, I'd say find parents that own a television station.
Yeah.
That would have been do the Wick Grosbeck thing. But that would have been my advice. But Lynch's was sound.
Well, so, I mean, I think I know the answer to this, but I don't think, if I were to ask you guys, is there a better place to do what we do than Boston? I think your answer would be no, because I think it's the best sports media market in America.
You wrote a book about that, right? This is our city.
Yeah, well, and really just about the entire the run of success in the, among those teams in that 20 years. But people care here. They like their teams. They love their teams, particularly the pro sports teams. And some, depending on the fan base, the relationships are different, but they're all pretty passionate.
Do you ever wonder why people call in? Do you ever wonder, why did he call? Why did, I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Of course, Bob. Yeah, all the time.
What motivates people to go from the listener to the caller?
So sometimes I think people want to hear themselves on the air. I think that is an exciting thing for people. The other thing is sometimes they, we have many repeat callers who have a very theatrical nature to them. So
Great.
Even when I was doing fill-in years ago at WEEI, there was a guy I used to call named Danny from Quincy.
I remember him.
Danny still calls our show. And I remember, there was a period of time there, and every once in a while I'll still get an email from him, but we started corresponding via email, and Danny and I have a lot in common. We have Italian immigrant families, and he's really nuts about sports, and he really likes the back and forth, the give and take, and so he he sort of feels like he's hanging out with his buddies, just going back and forth and busting chops. So he gets off on that part of it. Some people are just real sports nuts, analytics nuts. Some people just are waiting to be engaged in some sort of conversation. So it's a really small segment of the population that actually calls us as opposed to who listens. And we can lose sight of that sometimes because at the end of the day, you're doing the show for the people who are listening, not for the people who are calling. But they end up being a big part of the show because they give us pushback. And, and we need that because, as you know, Mike and I have all the answers. So.
Yeah, well, of course, that's why you're there.
This has changed your business right here. When Bob and I did call in sports talk show, and it was a regular landline all the time. And, people would be at work if they couldn't stay on hold for 15 minutes because their boss, they had to be back at their desk. The boss would be looking for them, or they ran out of dimes or something. But this has revolutionized talk radio.
Yeah, for sure, Mike. And I think there are pluses and minuses to that, because if you think about it, the phone, the whole Twitter thing, the whole message board and chat and all that stuff allows you to go back and forth with people anonymously, right? So people can hide a little bit, and that certainly gives people some freedom when they know there aren't necessarily repercussions. And those freedoms sometimes can be used to a fault, but oftentimes they can really lead to productive things and allow people to give out information and share things that they know without being held accountable for them. Talk radio has always been anonymous. So you can come up with a fake name in a fake town. The only thing that could possibly identify you is your voice, but there are very few people who know that. So, but the phone definitely gives people access to everybody pretty much all the time. And, we used to have a text line. We don't use it as much anymore. I'm not even sure we have it anymore, but the text line, for whatever reason, would always get a little crazier and, off the wall and, for lack of a word, unregulated. Not that the internet is regulated anyway. But yeah, the phone has changed everything completely.
You guys have a great self-deprecating way about you. I mean, even when it comes to, email of the week. I mean, as a fan, I mean, I listen, and Felger, I really hate you. Mazz, I think you're a boob. I mean, I think those stuff really serves. I mean, the production behind you, Jim Murray or whoever's behind that, I think he's been a fabulous find. And just adding that in, and you have a whole line, but I think the whole people that stand behind the show and the production level is fantastic. I mean, it just really makes such a big difference.
Yeah. So, again, to me, it's all about the fit and the group of people and whether everyone sort of is invested and understands what the back and forth and engagement is. So, it's on different levels. It's not that different from putting on a sportscast. Your interaction back then was with the other anchors, right? So you weren't necessarily having a sports conversation, but you were delivering that part of it. And then people always talk about the banter, Bob, that you had with Liz Walker, or Mike, the banter you would have with Chet Natalie or whoever else, right? It's like there was always some sort of back and forth that allows you to be human in there. And, I think we all play different roles. So the way I look at the thing with the three of us is Mike and I are sports guys doing radio. Murray is a radio guy doing sports.
Fair.
And Murray is a tremendous asset to us because of that, because he is a real, and Jimmy Stewart and Kevin Majori are producers as well. And Billy Lanny was another producer who worked with us for a number of years. Those guys all offer something different. And that's really important because you want to have as broad an audience as possible. And so, if we get too serious or too uptight, or we start taking ourselves too seriously, inevitably you'll hear Jimmy Stewart chime in and cut us down to size, or Murray will come up with some sort of bit, and we do try to laugh at ourselves. I think that's important, but we're also guilty as anyone else is of sometimes taking yourselves too seriously. So there's a balance in there, and Mike's obviously the lead, and I try to work around him, as does Murray. Mike's a pretty intense personality who is really, really smart and studies things to tremendous detail and has an unbelievable memory. So all that stuff has been so we just try to use our strengths and play off each other, and we try to have fun when the time calls to have fun, and when there are serious stories, we try to treat those seriously.
What about the good cop, bad cop? I think that just evolved naturally between you're the good cop, but Felger's is the bad cop. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think that's a loose, that's a general framework that works for a lot of people. And my personality, despite the fact that I sometimes come off as a raging lunatic, he has much sharper edges than I do. Mine are probably, mine can be sharp in places depending on what, where you touch them. But yeah, I think, I think we've learned to sort of play off each other a little bit in that way. And, there are times where I feel like I have to match his intensity. And I think that is probably a mistake, because Mike's intensity level is, can be really, really high. And that, again, that's his strength, that when it needs to be high, he can get there, no problem. And I try to counterbalance that where I can. And again, Murray offers us a completely different perspective sometimes that is really important as well. So, it'll be 16 years in August now that we've been together on the air.
Fantastic.
And I would say, the beginning was bumpy. Mike and I didn't really like each other all that much in the beginning. And I can speak for myself, Antonia, that I think some of it was me adapting to, I had never done talk radio full time, first of all. And that is a massive adjustment, because, when you are on that many hours versus, 4 hours, 8 hours a week as a guest, the demands are different in terms of your level of focus and, the amount that you have to talk and how much energy you have to put into it. So that was a huge adjustment for me. I don't think I appreciated the the work that it was going to take and the energy and commitment that it was going to take. And it took me a long time to figure that out. But then once we sort of hit a rhythm, I think, for a long time, it's been good. And we get sick of each other like everyone else does.
Yeah, relationships, 16-year relationship's a long relationship, no matter what it is.
Well, right. And particularly in this business, right? There's a lot of ego. And I was going to say the other part of it is I was used to, as a writer, I was used to being able to write what I wanted, when I wanted. And, when you wrote something, your name was on it and it was yours. There was no gray area. Talk radio is much more of a group thing. And, I didn't handle that adjustment well at the beginning. And there are times I still don't. So, you really have to try to keep your ego out of the way. And that can be hard.
Lynchy, let's do some stories. Can we, that he's talked about on the show, and some of the things like, I'm just dying to get into this Belichick story, and I'll use any excuse to do it right now. But I don't know if you heard a podcast from Pablo Torre. If you listen to Pablo's unbelievable.
Relentless.
Pablo Torre Finds Out is the name of the podcast. But he just recently did one on Belichick and the lovely Jordan, excuse me. And Tony, what do you guys think of? I'll ask, I guess Tony's the one that really, because you guys have talked about this ad nauseum, and for good reason, because it's one of the more fascinating stories out there, and it just won't go away.
Yeah, so to me, the part that is most relevant is, look, at the end of the day, it's his life, it's her life, and if they're choosing to be together, they can be together.
Of course.
Yeah, the part that I find most interesting is what bearing did it have, particularly on the Patriots when we were here, or when Bill was still here. And so we are now finding out that in the last year or two that Bill was coaching the team, that he would stay in the team hotel and she would stay with him on the night before games. So like you hear things like that and you start to think, well, wait a minute now. So how much of a distraction was she for him? And did the Crafts know it, which I'm sure they did. And the people around Belichick had to know it. So because we all know how people operate. Someone hears something or someone sees something and then someone says this. And now the next thing you know, everybody knows. Or there's someone in the organization that is a conduit for ownership and they're passing on information. And so this all leads me to when Belichick left the Patriots and he went to meet with the Atlanta Falcons, and Atlanta looked like they were going to hire him. And then at the last minute, Arthur Blank, the owner of the Falcons, did a 180 and they decided to go in a different direction, and Belichick didn't get the job. And we find out that somewhere in that process that Arthur Blank spoke with Robert Kraft, which you would expect anyway. But now I think back and say, well, wait a minute. If Jordan was in the way, in the same way that she has apparently been in the way at North Carolina, which led them to issue a statement indicating that she had nothing to do with North Carolina football. But if she was around and hovering and sitting in the stands and at practice wearing red pants so that Bill could identify her. And again, these are all things that came out in the Pablo Torre report. If all that was going on, then Robert Kraft might very well have said to Arthur Blank, hey, look, the last couple of years here, he's got this new girlfriend and she is really consuming a lot of time. She's much younger than he is. And I'm not sure he's as invested or as focused as he used to be. And if he's not as focused and as good as he used to be, I don't know if it's worth the headache. If that was the message conveyed, well, then, she's part of the reason he's not working in the NFL. And I'm just giving you a strict football part of it. But, he's made some curious decisions at the end of his career as we've gone on. I don't need to tell you guys, hiring Patricia and Judge as offensive coaches when they'd never done it. And they had a rookie quarterback at the time who needed someone with experience and understanding. And it was all really kind of reckless. That year when they hired Patricia and Judge, and the year having gone south as bad as it did, I thought that was a fireable offense. Like, to me, that was bad. And that was really kind of putting yourself before the organization. And then they brought in Billy O'Brien. The Crafts let him stay for a year. But I think that was the year that really started his demise. That was the one that, to me, started to take it down. And Jordan was part of the picture then. So the whole thing really, just unraveled quickly.
So now he's got a $1 million buyout at North Carolina, and that could, make it a whole lot easier for him to get back into the NFL.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if he used that, Bob, because I don't see where else he has to go. I think this whole thing this past spring, with the CBS interview and Jordan Hudson thrusting herself into the middle of that, I think that whole thing hurt him even further. So I still think there's a chance that North Carolina will back out of this thing. And that would mean paying Belichick $10 million or whatever it is to get out of the contract. But when you're talking about a place like North Carolina and its alumni network and the potential endowment there and the potential booster involvement there, I think they could raise $10 million like that. So now it seems things have quieted down. But if there's any other flare up, it would not surprise me in the least bit if North Carolina got out of that.
It was such a fascinating story, and
unbelievable.
It's I don't know, Lynch, you may have your own thoughts about that, but Tony, we can always go to the Red Sox too, and we can go the whole Mookie Betts is where it all started. I mean, I guess it was Pete Abraham that had the thing in the Globe that Mookie Betts.
I thought they had a 10-year run with the killer bees in that outfield. Between Benintendi and Jackie Bradley Jr. and Mookie Betts, those three guys. I thought they were going to be the cornerstone of that team, and they would just continue building the team around them. And it just blew up, and they all went away. They're lucky right now because there's nothing else going on but baseball. But they're playing horrible right now.
They suck, Mike. They really suck.
They are horrible. I mean, they are the biggest strikeout machine I've ever seen in my life. I think they struck out almost 600 times. But they get a 6-week window right here to try to get some people back in and be loyal to baseball. Because once that preseason football camp opens, that first practice, Red Sox are totally irrelevant. They're irrelevant right now, but they'd be permanently irrelevant once if something doesn't happen between now and when training camp opens.
Yeah, and Mike, if you think about it, they've really had a little bit of a window here for a few years to really grab some sort of ground and a footwork or a foothold rather in Boston and New England. There's been an opportunity for them to kind of jump back up again, and they haven't done it. And so they're kind of all over the place. So you look at it the last, let's call it 5 or 6 years. Cora was here, then he went out, then he came back in again. They've had 3 different baseball executives over that period of time. They traded Mookie Betts. That whole nucleus that you talked about should have had a longer window than it did. It fell apart very quickly. And then they've been very unstable ever since. So, and there was all this hype surrounding the guys that they're now bringing up, which is Marcelo Meyer, Roman Anthony, certainly, Christian Campbell, who kind of thrust on the scene late. But those 3 guys, and there was a 4th, Kyle Teal, a catcher that they also drafted very highly. But they traded him for Garrett Crochet, which is fine. I mean, he's a young pitcher. So you swap out a catcher for a pitcher, and that's okay. I mean, there was all this hype around these young guys, and now the young guys are here, and the team's still not ready. So, I look at the way, to me, the right way always to integrate a lot of these young players was to have a veteran team around them so that when they came in, they didn't have to do everything. And it's just not realistic to ask a rookie to come in and take over the team the way that Fred Lynn and Jim Rice did, 50 years ago. It's just, that doesn't happen all that often. It's hard to do it that way. And if you go back to the first, let's call it 10 years of the ownership of this group, when Theo Epstein was running the Red Sox, it used to be that when they brought in a young player, they would hit him at the bottom of the order. They would let him make his mistakes. And then once he got a half season under his belt, or he had adapted to the major leagues, maybe it was a full year, they would then put him in a bigger role and they would increase the responsibility as the player got more mature and more developed. Now they're dropping these guys into the lineup and hitting them clean up, 10 days into their careers. And it's ridiculous. There's too much put on them. They're not ready for that, and the team's not ready for that. So I think they've done a really poor job putting in the support structure around them. And the team doesn't have a lot of margin for error, and things have gone wrong. And, another part of it is I don't think Cora has ever been on board with either one of the last two GMs.
No, I think there's a Breslow-Cora issue going on right now.
Yeah, and there was one with Chaim Bloom before that, Bob.
All Yale guys, by the way.
I'm sorry?
All Yale guys.
Yeah. So I think, right, I think there's a thing with, so this is a Harvard guy dumping on the Yale guys. I get
Of course.
I didn't put that
Right over your head, Tony.
Exactly. So, but I'll tell you what, Theo Epstein went to Yale Law, right? Oh, no, he went to Yale undergrad. Yeah, he went to Yale undergrad and then went to law school in California. And Theo to me is, I think the world of Theo Epstein. I think his accomplishments in the game are borderline impeccable. So, but I look at it and I say, Cora doesn't connect with those guys. He's the wrong manager for this type of organization. It's a big market. They should be run like a big market team, but everybody wants the analytics and the inexperienced baseball.
Yeah, he just wants to bring back the trash cans. Bring back the old trash cans and let's get it on.
Yeah, right. So I don't see the fit between Cora and the organization anymore. And I think that that's a problem because Cora's an old school baseball guy who understands, like the stuff that you said, the strikeouts. Cora doesn't want strikeouts. The number of times he strike out's ridiculous.
Put in play.
Oh, gosh. I mean, the productive out still matters.
You're right. All right. So you let's say you have a couple of grandkids, Maz. We're gonna jump forward a few years, okay?
Okay.
And you're going to a Red Sox game, and you go over to the Twin souvenir, and you tell them both, you can have any player's jersey you want. I'll buy it for you. But the Twins is sold out of Bregman and Devers. What jersey do your grandkids want to buy?
Oh. No Devers, no Bregman.
No, they're sold out.
So my guess is that
you've already answered my question by just with your silence. Is that who you go watch? And I mean, there used to be a time you walk across the street, Veritek, Pedroia, Papi, Nomar. I mean, there'd be 15 jerseys you could buy, you'd want to buy, you could identify with. I don't think this is still an anonymous team out here. I don't think half the people in New England could, if you asked the people there, I said, all right, close your eyes. What's the starting lineup for the Red Sox tonight? They couldn't name two people.
No, and the other thing, the other problem, Mike, is that the sport's not what it was, right? Yeah. So the sport's not as popular as it used to be. So, like, for example, if you asked me to name who did they play before the Braves, like when they were playing the Twins, or they were
in Milwaukee. They were in Milwaukee.
Yeah, right. Well, I could name like 1-2 guys on the Brewers. One of them was Christian Yelich.
Yelich, right.
Yeah, and so the sport itself has had a major dip in popularity, but speaking to the Red Sox in particular, they've sort of adopted this philosophy that every other team does now, which is we just keep drafting and we turn them over every 3 or 4 years. So all they are is who's the latest guy they brought in that they picked up off the street, or is that they're going to try to tap into his talent in a way that no one else did through analytics and get relatively good production for a cheap price. Like that, the whole game now is about the front office, which means the stars are the GMs, or at least they think they are. And the fans don't have anyone to connect to because who cares? How many fans are going to relate to a GM?
All you had to do was compare the Red Sox to the Dodgers this weekend. And it was easy to do because they were both on television. And the Red Sox, and when you saw what the Dodgers threw up against the Yankees, for what the Dodgers were able to put on the field without Mookie Betts, by the way, who has a broken toe.
Right.
I mean, it's
Yeah,
amazing. It's remarkable, the difference in the organizations.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Bob, too, I was watching some of that pregame last night, and they were focused on Judge and Ohtani. And I thought, they were doing, because both of them are having just tremendous years, and Judge in particular is playing out of his mind. And I know that, Judge is not with the Dodgers, but Judge is a megastar in baseball. As much as we have talked about Ohtani, Ohtani's a revolutionary kind of player. In any era, you drop Aaron Judge, we're looking at him like he is Mickey Mantle. I mean, he's that kind of. He's 6'8". He's a giant. He hits it, 480 feet, and he's hitting for a high average. And I was thinking, that used to be the Red Sox on that stage, and they would have those kinds of players. To your point, and the country would be celebrating Ohtani versus Judge, like it did. Strike me watching it, going, "Oh yeah, I remember when this would matter: Monday Night Baseball or Sunday Night Baseball." Right. And the two best players.
It's like the Patriots and their important games on television. The Red Sox couldn't be further down the list in teams they want to put on to watch on television.
Right. They were the A-list, right? Last night was an A-list matchup. That's what that was, Yankees-Dodgers.
Yeah.
And look, again, it's a smaller stage now for baseball in general, but the Red Sox don't have, and I don't think they're that interested in it anymore. I don't think the owners want it because Judge and Ohtani cost, $500 million. And I'm not sure the Red Sox want to do that anymore.
So why isn't Anthony up here?
I think it's got to do with service time, and they know that Anthony's going to be hard to sign long-term. So the best way for them to keep him for the longest period of time is to delay his arrival.
Yeah, I think you're right. I thought it was either financial, but you can equate that to service time.
Absolutely. Yeah, so there is this, there's a rule in baseball now, a couple of years back. They changed some of the stuff in the bargaining agreement so that if a team brought a guy up to from the minor leagues early on, and he then won the Rookie of the Year award or an MVP in his first 3 years, but the Rookie of the Year award's a big one, you get an extra draft pick for that now. So, but if you bring up 3 rookies, you're only going to get 1 draft pick, okay? And then secondly, the guy who wins the Rookie of the Year award, let's say it's Anthony, he then gets credit for a full year of service, whether he had a full year or not. So if the Red Sox bring him up now and he goes crazy and wins the Rookie of the Year, that costs them 1 full year of his service, even though he played, let's call it 4 months. So I think they're trying to delay it because he's going to until more than halfway through the season, so that when they bring him up, he can't win the Rookie of the Year award, and then they get 6.5 years out of him instead of 7 or 6.
I don't know. Mike, should I do this commercial?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Bob. Because no one does it like you.
Well, I don't know what else. I'm the only one that has the script.
Watch this, Tony.
If you had a script in your hand like I do, you could do it.
I don't use script.
So no one does it like me because I have a script. That's the only one.
Tony would say, "How's script?"
Yeah, exactly.
Tony, you're going to be a part of this, and I don't, this is Cold Springs RV, and now's the time to see a fantastic selection of travel trailers, fifth wheelers, park models, pop-ups, and motorhomes at Cold Springs RV. And I have a very interesting story about our 2 campers that I've talked about. Camper, him and her having separate campers, meeting at a campground in Raymond, New Hampshire, finding out they kind of like each other. And so they have the freedom to come and go as they please. Well, sadly, I'll relay this. At one point recently, one of them decided to go. And so, picked up and drove away. And that was the end of that. That's freedom. You can come and go as you please. Now, there's no report on that person coming back, but right now, they've gone their own separate ways in their own separate campers. So that's total freedom. So go in and browse in a pressure-free environment and find the
are
RV of your dreams.
there two happy campers or one happy camper?
No, right now, well, that's a really good question, Mike. I think there are. I think it's 1.5. I don't think both parties. I don't think both they're both happy to be campers. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying they're two happy campers. I'll just leave it at that.
They should have had you, when you were on the desk, they should have had you read the commercials live. It would take 30 minutes, but it would have been fun.
I'm not done yet, Mike, okay? I'm not done.
Oh, sorry. Okay. All right.
Okay. Cold Springs RV, new family can shop with ease, okay? You and your whole family. Tell them Lobel and Lynch sent you. Let me cut that part out because that takes 10 seconds right there. You can make this a summer to remember with a camper from Cold Springs RV, as our two friends have done. They made it a summer to remember. Pressure-free dealers at Cold Springs RV in Ware, New Hampshire. Ware, New Hampshire. It's just west of Goffstown and north of Tingsboro. Right, of course. Pressure-free dealer at Cold Springs RV, and learn more at coldspringsrv.com. Thank you very much. I really whipped through that in a hurry.
I tell you, I think the sponsors are really going to love the way you presented that, Bob. That was classic.
Well, it was kind of a sad story in the middle, but a happy one because it's about freedom. But go ahead, ask Tony what you're going to ask.
All right, we got 3 happy campers right here. So Tony, here it comes. I don't know if you remember, but we don't pay guests, as you well know, and you're not surprised by that, I'm sure. And but Cold Springs RV is in the process of building a Lobel Lynchy cruiser, which is going to be far and above the Madden cruiser ever was. This is going to be great. So we're going to give each one of our guests the Lobel Lynchy cruiser to use for 1 week. You get to drive from Massachusetts to the West Coast. We'll fly you back. The problem is you got to pick one person to ride shotgun with you. All right, and this person, since you're a big baseball guy, this guy has to have been a baseball player, a baseball executive, a manager, and it could be alive, deceased, past, present. Somebody that you would like to have riding shotgun with you in the Lobel Lynchy cruiser across country. Now, who would you pick?
That was longer than the commercial, Mike. Come on.
That was pretty good.
Okay, so the idea is I'm doing a cross country trip.
Yep.
And I can pick anybody to come with me for that 1 week.
Yeah.
Oh, dead or alive.
Okay, and you want it to be a baseball person?
Yeah, only because yeah.
So I'll tell you that's it's a tough question to pick just one. But I'll tell you what, like assuming the person would want to come with me, right? In other words, I could pick a lot of people who would say, thanks, but no thanks, I'm not coming. In fact, I think they would all say that. So I would pick, oh gosh, from 98 to 03, 04, the Red Sox had so many characters and personality. Like there were some guys that I really connected with that were lesser players that I would get along the best with on that trip. I always got along with the catchers for some reason. So like Mike Stanley, Scott Hatterberg, those guys were good, solid. And really the whole team was pretty good.
Well, but the guy played a position. They'd actually agreed to play a position.
Yeah, exactly right. That doesn't happen as much anymore.
No, apparently not.
I would tell you I found the most compelling, interesting person that I covered to be Pedro. I thought Pedro was, like if you could get an honest 1 week just hanging out with Pedro and, but I was able to do that for basically 7 years in some ways when he was in the clubhouse. Pedro was at times as generous and kind as anybody. He could be difficult. He could be high maintenance. He could be hilarious. He's a really complex, complete sort of human being, really smart. And what I liked is that, we all have some of that in us. And with him, he was never afraid to show you any of it. So I just thought the world of him, and you guys covered him too. So, I mean, he was a character, and he could be a pain in the ass, and, he could be combative, but I don't, but he was human. He was completely, totally human and never anything other than that. And so you knew what he was. And at his core, very good-hearted, kind-hearted, generous guy who cared about other people. And Pedro to me, well, I'll never cover anyone like him again.
So he's coming on the trip.
He would be my pick.
Okay, that's a good one. We've had some. Who did Mike Milbury had Winston Churchill?
Oh, great one.
Who had somebody had a singer, but yeah, they've been different.
Taylor Swift.
That was Upton.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, like if we get into other other areas, like to be able to go with somebody who had, if we're talking about people who are living, or Muhammad Ali would have been a great one.
I picked him already. I already picked him. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, he had so many. His life was so
the best,
covered so much between.
If you haven't watched Ken Burns and the Muhammad Ali documentary on PBS, do yourself a favor and watch it.
Okay, I will. I hadn't heard about that.
Oh my God, Tony! It's I'm a bad man. You can imagine just.
I mean, I just think he was, he was an extraordinary figure in history, let alone sports. Between social justice movements and the Vietnam War, and he was a tremendous personality and figure in world history. So Muhammad Ali would be one of the ones at the top of the list for me. I'll tell you, in a lot of ways, like Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, people have been revolutionaries in their fields or sports. Larry Bird crossed my mind. I mean, amazing people who lived incredible lives.
So you'd pick Rafael Devers, but he wouldn't drive. He would.
Yeah, we're gonna have to.
He'd have to he'd just be a passenger. He wouldn't.
Does the RV have a kitchen?
So let me ask you this, Tony. Has that whole dust storm died down about with your callers day to day, week to week about Devers not playing in the field?
So I think it's still there. I don't think it's fully gone away, Mike. And I think because they've underachieved and now they've had some injuries. So every time there's an injury, it sort of gets rekindled. Because initially it was Casas got hurt, and then, Devers will play first, and he didn't want to do it. Then it sort of started to die down, and what happened? Bregman got hurt, and now it's, can Devers go back to third now? And these are all logical questions. But I'll tell you, the one at third base, like I think there's a difference between the two positions, and I'll tell you why. I don't think the Red Sox wanted Devers to play third base anymore. I think they wanted him out of there. So he didn't want to DH, but they wanted him out of third base. Then it was the Red Sox again who wanted him at first. So the point being, it was better for the team to get Devers off of third base. It was not better for the team for Devers to resist first base. So I think he was more of a villain on the first base thing than he was on the third base thing, because they were basically kicking him out of his position. And the second one, they were asking him to do something else, and he wouldn't do it. So I think that pissed him off a little bit more.
What was the whole dog and pony show with the owner coming out, John Henry coming out and having these, meetings with?
They all flew out to Sam went out, Breslow came out. They all flew, and Henry was the only guy that went in the room to talk to him, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it was more about showing support for Breslow than anything else, because Devers called out the GM, right? He called out the chief baseball executive and really singled him out. Cora obviously wanted nothing to do with the whole thing and kind of handed it off to Breslow, which I thought was weird, because typically the manager is the one that would address something with the player. So I think that ownership felt like they had to step in to say, hey, look, he's doing his job for the betterment of the team. So if you're going to give him a problem, you're giving me a problem. And, I don't know how Devers reacted to that or whether Devers even cares. at the end of the day, his money's guaranteed. And if he wants to tell the owner to go pound sand, he can do that. The owner can trade him, then get rid of him. He's hard to move. They probably have to eat some money to do it. But guaranteed contracts in baseball give a lot of power to the players. So Rafael Devers is going to get his $300 million one way or the other, and John Henry's going to pay it whether he likes it or not.
What if you're a teammate, and you see this behavior, say, hey, look, we need somebody to step up. We need a first baseman. We might need a part-time third baseman. What do you say if you're a teammate? I'm pissed off. I mean, I'll tell you right now how I feel.
Well, I was just going to say, I think they are pissed off. Now, again, there are some guys who don't care, right? But I think that at the end of the day, what you're getting at is the team gets split, right? There's a divide there. So some of because the players are human, they're going to talk about it during batting practice or sitting around the clubhouse or on a flight. Like, what do you think of this? Well, it doesn't bother me, I'm a veteran guy and I'm okay with it. And the young guys go, well, yeah, but don't we want to win? Like, why wouldn't he just go over and do it? So you're going to get a divide in the room. And then people are, and so it's just not a great, look, at the end of the day, talent wins. But in order to get the most out of your talent, you do have to have some cohesiveness and belief that you're all kind of fighting for the same thing. There's got to be some of that on a team. There aren't many teams in history that can win disliking each other. And they exist. But it's better if everybody's sort of on the same page and pulling in the same direction, or at least if most people are. So back in 2004, Manny Ramirez, the Red Sox were able to win in spite of Manny Ramirez's antics because the other 24 guys on the team were all pointed in the same direction for the most part. So they could put up with some of the bull crap and they won. And, at the end of the day, when it came time to play, they would all play because they knew they had a chance to win. When you're a lesser team, to have fractures like that's no good. And I think the Red Sox have some of that now. They're kind of a mess.
What are your listeners? What are they telling you? They're like 80-20 against Devers in this whole thing,
yeah.
90-10, or 100 to 100%, all in the Red Sox scoring against Devers.
Yeah, you almost never get 100% on anything because there's always going to be someone that is going to blame the team that they didn't handle it well or they should have told them up front. Like there's always some of that. But I would say in this one, it's if you get past 60-40 on any argument, now it's really becoming a landslide, I think, because now it's 2 against 1. Once you get to 2/3 against or 2/3 for, it gets dominant. And I'd say Devers is 80-90%. I mean, it's in that area. He is just viewed as really, really selfish. And the other guy that's taken a massive beating in that story is Cora, because I think a lot of people look at it as the manager's job to get the player on board and get the buy-in. And I don't think the Red Sox have had full buy-in in a long time.
Devers is one of those, how come we get players like that?
Yeah. And, Bob, the funny thing is, he might be the one guy on the team that's actually living up to his contract.
I agree. Yeah. No, that's right.
So that's the funny part of it. I say the funny part of it, like if you were to say to a fan, well, what would you rather have? A Rafael Devers you don't like, who's one of the 5 best hitters in baseball this year, or the Rafael Devers you do like, and he's hitting 30 points lower with 5 home runs. And most people would say, look, if the other guys do their jobs, I'll take the guy who hits, right?
Yeah.
So he's the last reason, at least on the field, in terms of the productivity, he's the last reason they're in the spot they're in.
And let me ask you about another guy whose last name begins with D, Stephon Diggs. What's going to happen with this guy? I just see trouble all the way down the road, all the way down.
So, Mike, I think if there's another incident, I think he's gone. And again, I don't look. They might be there already. But I think that if they had really been turned off by the last one, they would have pulled the plug by now. I mean, we're basically almost a week out from that. And I don't think it's necessarily the video or the fact that he might have been, handing out drugs at a party or whatever else on a boat. I think it's more that it was public, and you get the feeling that he's not necessarily doing the work they want him to do to get ready for the season. So did he just take their money and, yeah, I'll see you in July? In which case they look at him and say, well, we're not looking for that. You said you were going to be a bit of a leader, which means we don't just need the bare required minimum, because these are voluntary workouts. But when you're a guy rehabbing from an injury, you should be there.
Well, my phrase,
Yeah, good, but
if someone said to me, Stefan Diggs, you're going to be a leader, he said, well, every one of my teammates would have wanted to be on that boat with me. That's what he, so I'm the leader. Everybody would have been here. That was a really stupid thing for him to do.
yeah, I agree. And the part that I found most stunning about it was that it was like someone was recording it, which he knew, and then put it on the internet, which he must have been okay with. So like, it's what are you doing? Like you can go out and have a good time and no one will know anything about it. I mean, but as you were saying, Mike, before we all got we all got these things and we were walking around with video cameras all the time, there was a lot of stuff that went on that nobody knew about it. And in a lot of ways, the world wasn't affected as a result of it. So unless or until it became a legal matter or, something of the like, no one even cared. But now when you throw it out there, now you're inviting the scrutiny and you're creating a distraction. So I think that, I just think it's really a bad judgment on his part. It really indicates his head's not screwed on. He's not, doing the kinds of things that his employer would want them to do. And more importantly, he doesn't care what they think of it. That's the part that would concern me most if I were the Patriots.
Well, do you think his owner is going to get into the Hall of Fame? Yeah, I should ask you that before we have to leave here.
I'm sorry, who?
Do you think Kraft is going to get into his precious NFL Hall of Fame?
I mean, he's got to get in eventually. I think, he's certainly worthy given what the standards have been for other owners. But I do wonder if it might be, after he can enjoy it and after he's died. So, which is really, sort of like this Pete Rose thing. Now they've ended his ban and now he can get in the Hall of Fame. But the whole point for Pete Rose was for it to happen while he was alive. And I think Robert Kraft obviously wants to get in while he's alive. So it would mean something to his family. But it does feel like they're going out of their way to screw him on some level, and I'm not sure why.
Interesting.
Hey, let me read this before we say goodbye. Sure. If you're thinking about a new vehicle, go where Lobel and Lynch go. Go see our good dear friend George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota. We've been customers for years because we know that George Gray will treat you right. They're family-owned and operated dealership that we trust, and you can trust as well. Go see the big wheel, we call him, the great George Gray at George Gray's Lexington Toyota, 409 Mazz Ave in Lexington. And we also should, at this time, George Gray lost his wife, Mary, last week. She got ill. It was very rapid, and they had the wake and they had the funeral last Friday and Saturday. George is a terrific guy, friend of all of ours. He has 3 sons. But Mary was the rock that held that family together. We love her. She's a lot of fun. They were a great couple together. George is about 6'4", and Mary was about 5'2", and they would just come around all the time, and they'd have a good time. And then, she'd always be keeping George in line. But all of us here at Bob, myself, and anybody else that's ever been over at George Gray's Lexington Toyota, if you stop in there, make sure you just tell somebody that, hey, I'm very sorry about Mary because she was the best.
That's good, Mike. That's true. Tony, I have a couple more questions I want to ask you before we go. Unless you want to bail, Lynchy, it's up to you. But I wanted to ask him about who do you think knifed Francona? Who stuck the knife in Francona's back?
In Boston?
Yeah.
My guess is it was mostly Lucchino at that time would be my guess. But I would also say don't rule out, baseball operations, Theo Epstein and his crew. I think there was, there's always, if you think of it this way, I always looked at it as, here's the business side, here's the baseball side, and Larry sat sort of above both. Both was a pyramid, and so the heads of each side would report to Larry, and the baseball side was Theo, and the business side was really Sam Kennedy, although Larry saw that. But so my guess is Larry, I don't think does anything without any input from both sides. And if the baseball ops side really thought Francona was doing a job that was worthy, I think they would have sold Larry on that, and they didn't. So, but at the end of the day, Larry was making the decision, and he and Francona always kind of clashed anyway. And the other thing I'll say, Bob, is that at the end, I think Francona was ready to get out of here because he was tired of it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. It was Holler that put that was a front page article that killed him.
Yeah. Yeah. And when that came out, I think a lot of people assumed that ownership and Larry had leaked it.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm done, Lynchy. Tony, been a great guest.
Tony said to get to work.
Yeah, no worries.
No, wait, you show up at like Lynch 5
No
minutes.
script, Mike. It's the beauty of talk radio. No script. We just kind of go with it.
So all I'd hear from her, because Tony and Matt Smith would get shit from the director downstairs. It's like saying, "All right, I'm where's the script? Where's the sports script? I need to block it. Lynchy, where's the script? Don't worry about it. We're all set. Don't worry about it." Every single night, I said, just tell them to pay attention, roll the tape, hit the sound button when it's supposed to come up, and we'll be good.
Well, so, here's the irony is that every day, because we're also simulcasting with commercials and everything, we actually put together what we call like a rundown. It's an outline that basically gives the idea of what we're going to do in each block of the show and what have you. So, and Mike is really detailed about it. And I should say that's comparatively speaking. I'm not. So I don't like having the script either, as it turns out. But anyway, listen, I think the world of both of you guys. You were both great to me. And so I owe you a lot for that. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I was happy to be on.
Thanks, Mazz.
Mazz, you're the best. You're awesome.
It's really a Maserati and Felger, not Felger and Maserati. So
thanks to you both, and thanks to your crew.
You've been together with Felger for 16 years. And how long was your internship at Channel 5? It was close to 16 years, wasn't it?
Yeah, it felt like it at times. Yeah, but I did. I think I still worked there, Mike, up until my late 20s. So I was there. I bet you I was there 10 or 12 years.
The guests that would never leave.
Yeah.
How did you get in the building every day? You didn't have a key or anything, right?
No, I would come in through the front desk or the loading dock. By the end of it, I think I had to have my name on the security list because otherwise it was like, who the hell is this guy? But for the first number of years, I would just walk in, you'd let me in the back door. I remember that.
Yeah.
But then eventually it reached a point where, they're like, oh yeah, we've seen you before. Come on in. The only person who was there more that didn't actually, or that was there as much as I was, that didn't actually work there was Mike's brother, Terry, who used to come in and watch the Patriots all the time back when they were getting blacked out.
Yeah. Instead of driving to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, my brother lived in Needham. He would drive down the street like 1.8 miles. And he'd act the same way he acted at home. He'd throw things and scream and yell, right?
All the time. Yeah. It made watching the game a lot of fun. So I hear from him every now and then. So, but when you speak to him, tell him I said hello. He's a good guy.
I will. All right, Tony, thanks a lot. It was a lot of fun. Continue great success with the show. Keep it going and come back and visit us again sometime.
You too, guys. Happy to do it anytime. Don't ever hesitate.
Enjoyed it a lot, Tony. Thanks so much.
Good talking to you both. Enjoyed
Tony
it.
Mazzarati has been our guest, and make sure you follow us on UnAnchoredBoston.com.